Good evening, traveler of glowing screens and heavy eyelids. Somewhere in the background, your day is still buzzing, but here, in this quiet corner of the internet, the noise begins to soften. You listen to the hum of your own thoughts, and they feel a little like footsteps on damp grass, wandering toward something older, gentler, and strangely patient. You picture yourself on a lonely hill, where the sky is still half asleep and the world has not yet remembered its worries. In the present tense of your imagination, dawn stretches slowly over a ring of ancient earthworks, and a soft veil of mist folds itself around you. The air is cool, the ground is uneven, and you think to yourself that if this were a real Iron Age morning, with no modern shoes, no weather app, and no coffee, you probably wouldn't survive this very long. The fort, however, has already survived centuries of wind, rain, invasion, fashion trends, and people who thought socks with sandals were acceptable. It is still here, still watching, still waiting for you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been, your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now, turn off the lights, take a deep, slow breath, let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. The hill rises ahead of you, a broad back of earth and grass, layered with faint lines that only make sense once you slow down enough to see them. From a distance, it just looks like a pleasant, rounded shape against the sky. Up close, you notice the subtle ridges of rampart and ditch, curves carved by hands that never held a smartphone, never scrolled, never doom-read comment sections at midnight. Your feet pause at the base, as if your body is politely asking permission from the past. Mist rolls along the slope in pale, shifting sheets, gathering in hollows, thinning along the edges. The sky is still fragile, a soft gradient from deep blue to the first silvery hint of day. Birds begin before you, they always do. Their calls scatter through the air like little bright thoughts, flickering in and out of the fog. Somewhere down in the unseen fields, a distant shape moves. A farmer, perhaps, or just your mind filling the space with a fragment of story. You stand, suspended between sleep and waking, between the time you came from and the time that shaped this hill. The ground under your boots feels springy and damp, holding last night's rain and centuries of weather, hoofprints, and footsteps. Each blade of grass carries a tiny bead of water, so that when you shift your weight, you feel the cool splash through the fabric of your shoes. The air has that clean green scent that only exists before the day has had a chance to heat up and complicate everything. You breathe it in, and it feels like rinsing your thoughts under clear water. You look up at the outline of the ramparts, noticing how the earth folds and doubles back on itself. Nothing here is straight. The lines of defense are all curves, embracing the hilltop in wide protective arms. You imagine those arms closing around a community, fires, animals, laughter, arguments, lullabies, and the slow, steady rhythm of survival. Your own life, with its notifications and deadlines and half-finished to-do lists, feels oddly small from down here, like a village of worries gathered in a single valley, watched over by something older and less easily impressed. A narrow path snakes upward, just visible where the grass grows a little thinner. It passes through what was once an entrance, the main gate to a place that mattered enough for people to shape this much earth for it. The ditch below is softened by time, no longer sharp or threatening, just a gentle hollow where fog collects, turning it into a basin of cloud. You picture wooden palisades rising along the top, dark and rough, the fort bristling with stakes and intent. Now the stakes are gone, but the intent lingers in the layout, in the way the land still remembers the shape of human fear and human hope. As you stand there, the first real beam of sunlight reaches the upper ramparts, tipping the edges of the grass in pale gold. The mist glows, thins, and then regathers, like breath on a window. You feel that same breath in your chest, slow and deliberate, matching the rhythm of the land. The fort has been awake for a long time. You, on the other hand, are just beginning to wake up differently. Not toward another day of rushing, but toward a gentler awareness that not everything needs to be solved tonight. Some things are simply meant to be walked through. In the half-light, your thoughts begin to loosen. The worries that once shouted now seem to speak from farther away, muffled by distance in soft earth. You think of everything this hill has seen: storms, seasons, the rise and fall of kingdoms, the invention of questionable hairstyles, and it has endured all of it by simply staying where it is, leaning into the sky. You realize you do not need to have everything figured out before you reach the top. For now, it is enough that you are here, breathing, listening, and letting your pulse slow to match the quiet heartbeat of the ground. Your feet finally move toward the first gentle slope. The path invites you upward into the cool, damp air and the waiting lines of earth that curve around the hill like rings of a tree. You step into the history that lies just ahead, ready to climb through its layers, one quiet breath at a time. You lean into the slope, and the decision is made. Your weight tips forward, knees soft, shoulders loose, as if your body has quietly voted to keep going while your mind is still debating. The path is only a suggestion, a lighter line in the wet grass, but it is enough. You place your foot, then another, and the climb folds itself around you. To your right, the first bank swells up, an old wave of earth frozen mid-curve. Once it was sharp, crowned with timber and intent. Now it is rounded, more grandmother than warrior, offering moss instead of spears. The ditch at its base holds mist, the way a cupped hand holds water. You step along its rim, feeling the tug of gravity, adjusting without thinking, your balance answering questions before your brain hears them. With each meter gained, the world below loosens its grip. Fields flatten into quiet patterns. Hedges become faint green stitches. The far road turns into a thin, unlikely rumor of movement. Cars will pass, people will rush, but from here, they look like thoughts you used to have about things that used to matter more than sleep. The hill lifts you not just in space, but in priority. The ramparts repeat above you, ditch, bank, like the echoes of a decision made again and again by people who refuse to be easy to reach. You cross the next line and another, each one a soft checkpoint. With every ring, something unnecessary falls away. The half-finished conversation, the guilt about resting, the anxious habit of rehearsing arguments that will never actually happen. Your breathing grows heavier, but in a good, honest way, like opening a window. The cold air slides in, cools your chest, pushes out the stale warmth of hours spent sitting and scrolling. Your steps settle into a rhythm. Heel, roll, push. The soft thud of sole on damp ground. The occasional skid on a hidden stone that makes your heart jump and then laugh at itself. You brush the inner side of the bank with your hand as you pass. The moss is cold and springy, beaded with droplets that soak your fingertips. Tiny plants cling to the soil, roots sunk into centuries of discarded dust and ash. You imagine the hill absorbing everything people brought here: charcoal, broken pots, lost beads, breath, worry, hope, all of it pressed down into layers until it became the foundation under your boot. A narrow gap opens ahead, where path, bank, and ditch squeeze together. This was once an entrance, a controlled point, a place where strangers were slowed and weighed up. You have no shield, no offering, no explanation beyond being tired and curious. Still, you step through. The air on the far side feels a little stiller, the silence a shade deeper, as if the hill has gently shut a door behind you without making a fuss. Now you walk on the inside line, just below the crest. From here you can see the thickness of the earthwork, the way it bulges outward like a muscle that once strained and now rests. You picture people hauling baskets of soil day after day, back and shoulders burning, building a wall out of nothing but persistence. You think of your own walls, schedules, habits, avoidance, and how much effort you pour into defending things that may not really need defending. Small details tug at your attention. A rabbit track darts across your way, a twitchy little highway worn into the grass. A scrap of chalky stone protrudes from the bank, crusted with lichen pale as old bone. When your heel crushes a tuft of some nameless herb, a sharp, clean scent rises and flashes through your tired brain, like a tiny, sudden insight. For a second, you feel outrageously, pointlessly alive. With every step, time thickens under you. You imagine Roman soldiers glancing at this fort, cataloging it with practiced suspicion. You imagine medieval farmers cutting turf from its sides, not caring what it once was as long as it warms a hearth. You think of antiquarians in heavy coats measuring angles, writing earnest notes. Most of them thought their work would last. The only thing that actually has is the hill itself. The path curves again, spiraling inward. Your thighs grumble, but cooperate. You know you could stop, claim that this is far enough, that the view is already good. Instead, you keep going, because something quiet in you wants to see what happens if you reach the very middle, the space everything else was built to protect. For once, you allow yourself to move without needing a productivity reason. Mist thins as you near the top. The sky widens, paling at the edges, and the upper rampart appears ahead like the rim of a vast, shallow bowl. Beyond it waits the summit, holding its own slow breath. You feel the centuries stack beneath you: stone, soil, charcoal, bone, forgotten plans, and you let them bear your weight, step by deliberate step, as you climb into the inner circle of the waking day. The final curve of the rampart carries you up and over, and suddenly the hilltop is open around you. a shallow green bowl holding the first light. The center is mostly grass, soft and uneven, with a few low mounds hinting at old halls and fences. Patches of mist lie in the hollows, folded like pale blankets left out overnight. For a breath you stand there, alone with the quiet and the comfortable burn in your legs. Then you realize you are not alone. They appear slowly to your eyes, as if they grow out of the landscape. One figure follows the inner rim of the rampart at an easy, unfussy walk, boots adjusting to every dip without hesitation. Another stands near the middle, stretching in slow, deliberate movements, arms lifting and falling against the brightening sky. Off to one side, a small dog skims over the grass in joyful zigzags, repeatedly looping back to orbit a person wrapped in a big coat. These are the hill's regulars, the quiet company of dawn. What draws your attention first is how unhurried they all are. Your mind, which usually sprints even when your body is still, recognizes the absence of rush like a missing soundtrack. No one is checking a watch, tracking calories, or attacking the morning with industrial levels of motivation. They move the way the light moves across the grass, steadily, without drama, trusting that the day will arrive without being chased. The hill feels like an old friend to them, not a challenge to conquer. You follow a faint path toward the center, your steps instinctively softer, as if entering a room where other people are already speaking in low voices. Somewhere far below, the world is turning on alarms, kettles, and notification pings. Up here, the loudest sound is the whisper of wet grass under your shoes and the measured rhythm of your breathing. The early risers do not look at you, yet their calm shapes make a kind of loose circle around you, like lanterns placed at the edges of a clearing. One walker passes not far away, tracing the inner edge of the rampart. For a moment, your paths run parallel. Their shoulders hang loose, their pace is neither fast nor slow, just consistent, as if their body has memorized this line over years of repetition. This quiet lap around an old defensive wall has become their morning perimeter, not against enemies with spears, but against all the scattered distractions waiting below. Without deciding to, you fall into step, borrowing their rhythm for a few heartbeats, before your track gently curves away. Almost without thinking, you begin your own circuit. The rampart rises at your left hand, a cool slope of grass and moss. On your right, the interior dips gently toward the center of the fort. Your steps follow the curve as if there were rails beneath the ground. With each lap, your thoughts lengthen and uncoil. The jagged list of unfinished tasks fades to a faint background murmur, like a conversation in another room. You are not here to fix anything. You are here to move in simple, repeated shapes until your mind remembers how to be quiet. The person who was stretching settles onto a low mound, back resting against the invisible line of some vanished wall. From this distance you see only the relaxed angle of their body, hands quiet in their lap, head slightly bowed. They might be meditating, or they might just be sitting still long enough for their thoughts to catch up with their breathing. Either way, they seem to understand something you are only beginning to trust, that stillness is not the same as doing nothing, and that the day does not collapse if you start it gently. The dog continues its cheerful patrol, occasionally disappearing into the misty dips where the old ditches lie, then reappearing on the crest of a bank, tail flagging like a tiny standard on the fort's outer wall. Its companion walks steadily, pausing now and then to look out across the pale patchwork of fields and the silver line of the river waking below. For them, this is just another weekday, one square among many on the calendar, anchored by the simple habit of coming up here before the world fully remembers itself. You are a visitor to all of this, both to the hill and to this unambitious way of beginning a day, but the place accepts you with the same mild tolerance it extends to drizzle, sunlight, and the occasional person who thinks socks and sandals are a bold fashion statement. There is nothing here to compete with, nothing to measure, nothing to post. Gradually, the easy rhythm of the other walkers seeps into your muscles. Your shoulders sink away from your ears, your jaw loosens, and your thoughts drift wider, like mist lifting from the earth, as dawn slowly, calmly takes hold of the sky. As your steps settle into the curve of the rampart, your attention begins to slide away from the handful of modern figures and down into the older pattern beneath your feet. The hill is quiet now, but not empty. It holds too many traces for that. You slow, then drift toward the center of the fort, boots brushing the grass, and let your imagination do the one thing it is actually good at this early in the morning, quietly reconstructing worlds that no longer exist. You pause on a slight rise where the ground feels subtly different, firmer under the damp surface. Somewhere under the thin skin of turf, the ghost of a wall, a post hole, a floor once pressed by bare heels and small, running feet leaves a faint stiffness in the soil. You stand there and let the present loosen. The mist that lingers in the hollows becomes smoke. The silence thickens into the low, constant background noise of people living close to each other, close to animals, close to weather. In your mind, the green bowl of the hilltop rearranges itself. Grass shrinks back from rings of darkened earth where roundhouses rise, walls of wattle and daub, roofs sweeping low and conical like giant straw beehives. The damp morning smell shifts to wood smoke and wool, to earth packed tight by many seasons of footsteps, to the faint metallic tang of tools cooled in water. You do not see any of this with your eyes, but the layout of the fort gently suggests it, as if the hill is handing you a faded sketch and trusting you to color it in. You imagine a child stumbling out of one of those doorways, blinking at the bright edge of dawn, hair sticking up in sleep-tangled defiance of gravity. The air is colder than the inside of the house, and bare toes curl against the ground, testing its chill. There is no screen to check, no feed to scroll, only the immediate press of the day. Animals to feed, fires to coax back to life, water to carry from wherever the spring hides below the ramparts. You realize your version of rough morning looks embarrassingly luxurious from up here. Near the inner edge of the rampart, you picture a narrow lane of trampled earth, a path worn by the repetition of tasks rather than your leisurely wandering. People move along it with purpose, hands full of baskets, tools, bundles of brushwood. A woman passes carrying a bundle of kindling almost as big as she is, shoulders strong from years of doing this without calling it a workout. Somewhere a man bends over an anvil stone, striking, turning, cooling, repeating, shaping metal that will never know the inside of a factory or an instruction manual. You picture animals populating the edge of your vision. Small, sturdy cattle with slow, patient eyes, wiry pigs snuffling and rearranging whatever they encounter, shaggy ponies shifting their weight and exhaling clouds into the frosty air. Their presence is not optional decoration. They are mobile, breathing savings accounts, alarm systems, and dinner all in one. You think of your own relationship with food, neatly plastic wrapped and anonymous, and this older arrangement feels harsher but also strangely honest. Nothing here pretends it didn't come from somewhere. At the very center of the hilltop, you let a larger hall rise, a slightly more imposing roundhouse where people gather when weather or danger or celebration pulls them together. You picture the packed circle of bodies in winter, shoulder to shoulder, the roof dripping a little where smoke squeezes out, light from the central fire turning faces into shifting patterns of shadow and gold. Stories move around the ring, not as entertainment to fill a gap between tasks, but as tools for remembering who they are, what they fear, what they hope the hill will keep away. As you stand there in your entirely inadequate modern jacket, you feel the old tension that shaped these embankments. This fort is not some whimsical landscape feature. It is a response to worry. Not your brand of worry, emails, deadlines, the existential horror of group chats, but the simpler, sharper sort that comes with the possibility of strangers cresting a ridge with bad intentions. The ditches and banks under your boots are what anxiety looked like when it had to be carved out of soil instead of scribbled in notebooks or typed into search bars. And yet, even in your imagined fort, most days are not battles. Most days are repetition. Brush the floor, fix the fence, mend the pot, stir the grain, laugh at something small and stupid, go to sleep too tired to overthink anything. You picture someone your age or older, wiping ash from their hands, worrying about the weather, the harvest, the health of a child. Their concerns are as heavy and as real as yours, just shaped differently. Neither of you has any guarantee that it will all work out, and both of you keep going anyway. Wind tugs gently at your sleeves, as if reminding you that all of this is only a reconstruction, a careful layering of maybes on top of what archaeology and guesswork have left behind. The roundhouses fade back into mist, the smoke thins, the animals melt into the pale shapes of bushes and boulders. You are left again with grass, banks, and the quiet shapes of early walkers tracing their own morning rituals around the inner rim. The fort returns to being exactly what it is now, a place where nothing much happens and everything once did. You realize that by walking these lines, you're participating in a kind of soft, continuous ritual. The first builders lifted soil with aching arms. You lift your feet with tired legs and an overloaded mind. They built walls to feel safer. You come here to let your own invisible walls loosen. For a moment, the distance between their world and yours shrinks to the thickness of a breath. You exhale slowly, letting the imagined village and its people settle into the hill, into the earth, into the long, patient silence that waits just beyond the edge of your thoughts. You stand in the middle of the hilltop, the air around you thin and clear as a glass of water held up to the light. It would be easy to leave the fort as it is now, a calm bowl of grass and sky, and simply enjoy the quiet. But the earthworks under your boots were not built for calm. They were built for weather, for risk, for the kind of winters that did not care about your plans. So you let the scene tilt toward colder months. You picture the same ramparts blanketed in snow, their soft curves sharpened by white. The ditches become trenches of shadow, the banks smooth ridges. catching the low blue light of a short day. Wind knifes across the hill, dragging snow sideways, and the fort clenches against it like a muscle bracing for impact. Smoke rises from the round houses in thicker, darker columns, torn sideways by the gale. Your fingers feel colder just thinking about it, which is impressive considering you live in a world with central heating and fleece pajamas. Inside the houses, you let the darkness settle. Walls of wattle and daub hold back the worst of the wind, but not all of it. The roof gathers smoke and drips occasionally where the thatch has grown tired. In the center, the fire does the heavy lifting of both light and warmth. Flames lick around blackened stones, sending up a plume that tints everything amber and gold. Shadows of people stretch and shrink along the curved walls as they move, carrying tasks, food, and quiet habits. Time here is not sliced into hours. It is split between seasons of plenty and seasons of hope the stored grain lasts. You imagine a feast night, one of the evenings when the storm can rage all it wants outside, because there is something solid inside to answer it. A successful hunt, a good harvest, or the turning of the year has piled more food than usual onto low wooden boards. Meat spits over the fire, fat hissing as it drops into embers. Pots of grain stew bubble slowly, thick and patient, carrying the faint sweetness of last summer's fields. People settle in tighter circles, knees almost touching, shoulders brushing, sharing warmth in a way that does not need to be explained or documented. Outside, the ramparts stand with their usual lack of fuss. Snow clings to their sides, filling old footprints and animal paths, smoothing the surface so that only the broad, structural decisions remain visible. Beyond them, wind scours across open land, searching for gaps. The banks and ditches guide it away from the center, not perfectly, but enough to blunt its teeth. The fort does what it was built to do. It takes the first hit, so those inside can focus on basic tasks like staying warm, staying fed, staying quietly hopeful. You think about your own ramparts, the invisible ones you build out of plans, routines, and small compulsions. Checking your phone one more time, you call it staying informed, as if anxiety were a news service that must be refreshed every 10 minutes. Piling up work, you call it being responsible, even when it erodes the rest that would make you truly capable. The hill reminds you that defenses are only useful if they actually protect what matters, rather than draining all your resources just to exist. Back inside the imagined roundhouses, the feast winds down. The fire burns lower, settling into a red bed of embers. People stretch out on bedding that smells of smoke, listening to the percussion of storm against roof. This is not a cozy, curated version of winter. It is hard, cramped, and full of aches. Yet there is also a resilience here that you can almost feel under your feet. These people are not waiting for life to become easy. They are practicing how to endure, together, in cycles. Somewhere in this reconstruction, you tuck your own worries among their stored grain. The unanswered messages, the looming decisions, the nagging sense that you are already behind on a life you have not finished designing. All of it gets sealed up in an earthen bin in the corner. Not destroyed, not denied, just placed where it cannot rattle loudly in the middle of the night. The storm will pass, the season will turn, and when the door to that storehouse opens again, you can decide what still matters and what has quietly expired. Outside your actual body, on the actual hilltop, the present morning remains mild and gentle. No snow, no storm, just a light breeze pushing the last tatters of mist off the ramparts. But because you have let the fort show you its winter face, The calm you stand in now feels more deliberate, more earned. This place has already practiced surviving worse. You are the one still learning. You take a slow breath, letting the cool air wash in and out, and feel that practice settling quietly into your own bones. When you finally turn to leave the ramparts, it is not because the hill has grown less beautiful, but because it has done what you needed to do for now. The air feels a little lighter in your chest, your thoughts less tangled. Your feet, which have patiently carried you through several centuries of imaginary winter, are ready for a change of texture. You drift toward a gap in the banks where a path spills downward, slanting toward the fields and a darker fold of land where water hides. The descent is gentler than the climb, but it asks for a different kind of attention. The grass is slick with dew, and the slope encourages gravity to show off whenever you stop paying attention. You let your steps shorten, your weight sink into your heels, and the hill releases you gradually rather than all at once. Behind you, the fort shrinks in your peripheral vision from a world to a backdrop, the earthworks collapsing into one simple, overgrown ring. As you drop below the skyline, wind loses its sharpness. Hedgerows gather along the lower slopes, stitching the fields together with brambles and hawthorn. Birdsong thickens, louder here than it was on the bare crown of the hill, as if small throats feel braver when there are branches to vanish into. The world becomes close again, the wet slap of grass against your shins, the smell of soil, the occasional cold kiss of a spider's web across your face that instantly upgrades your heart rate. Somewhere, a tractor starts up, coughing the modern day into motion. A narrow track veers away from the main path, shouldering through elder and ash. It feels older than the neatly trimmed field edges, less interested in efficiency. You follow it because you came here to wander, not to optimize. The ground dips, the air cools, and your ears pick up a new sound, the faint, irregular murmur of water negotiating with stone. The track spills into a small clearing, and there, half hidden by trees and nettles, is the spring. It is not grand. From a distance, it could be mistaken for a muddy puddle that took itself too seriously. Yet as you step closer, you see the deliberate touches. A low, roughly built wall of stone curves around the source, containing a shallow pool clear enough to show pebbles and dark silt at the bottom. Water wells up from a crack, threads over the stones, and escapes down a narrow runnel into the field below. Ferns lean in, fronds dripping, as if the spring has been whispering gossip to them all night. You realize you are not the first person today to visit this quiet corner. The damp ground near the edge is scuffed with different shoe prints, and the scent in the air is not only earth and water. There is a faint trace of flowers, wild ones from the hedge, and something sharper from a shop-bought bouquet. On the flat stone at the lip of the pool, someone has left a small cluster of offerings. A daisy chain, already wilting, a smooth piece of beach glass, a coin dulled by water, and a folded scrap of paper weighted down by a pebble. Modern currency and older instincts sharing the same square meter. You crouch, joints creaking in a way that feels both mortal and reassuring, and look into the pool. Your reflection stares back, slightly warped by ripples, hovering between pebbles and sky. You see your face, of course, but also the evidence of the last few years, The fine lines where you have frowned too often at screens, the softness where stress snacks have made themselves at home, the tiredness that even good lighting can only disguise, not erase. For a moment, you are tempted to catalog flaws the way you might scroll through notifications. Instead, you let the reflection blur. Above your face, the branches overhead lace the surface with darker threads. Below, the pebbles sit with ancient indifference. Somewhere in that mix of present and past, your image dissolves and reforms alongside countless others who have peered into this same water, hoping for something: healing, luck, an answer, the strength to keep going. Not all of them knew the word Celtic or thought about hill forts. Some just knew that water that emerges from the ground, clear and persistent, feels like a good place to talk to the world. You imagine for a moment the older form of this spring. No mortar, no concrete, just stones arranged to coax the flow. People come carrying simple burdens: a child's fever, a bad harvest, a pain that does not show on skin. They cup water in their hands, pour it on cramped joints, lower a bead or brooch or carved wooden figure into its cool depth. The logic is not complicated. Something is given, something is asked. The spring cannot guarantee results, but it can hold the request in a place that feels bigger than one person's fear. Centuries later, the language has changed. New stories have been draped over the old ones like fresh cloth over an older table. Perhaps the spring has been claimed for a saint now, a neat name embroidered onto a much older garment. People still come, lighting candles, leaving flowers, tracing the sign of their faith in the air. The water does not seem to mind. It just continues to rise and overflow, patient with decoration, indifferent to rebranding. You think of the kind of wishes you might make if you trusted water to listen. Less, win the lottery, and more, please, just let me stop feeling like I am always late to my own life. Less, never feel anxious again, and more, help me find a way to live with this brain and still rest sometimes. Compared with prayers for survival, for literal food and warmth, your requests feel oddly luxurious. Yet pain scales to the size of its container. For someone whose battles are fought in email threads and medical forms rather than in winter storms, these wishes are still sharp. Without quite planning to, you slip a hand into your pocket and find a small, unremarkable coin. It has survived washing machines, coffee queues, and the bottom of too many bags, quietly waiting for a bus fare you never paid in exact change. You turn it between your fingers, feeling the ridges, the faint stickiness of old metal. Then, very simply, you lean forward and let it fall into the pool. It clicks softly against a stone and settles among other dull glints. The water closes over it without ceremony. Your reflection trembles, fractures, and then regathers, this time a little softer, as if the act of dropping something, anything, has smudged its hard edges. You have not solved your life. The spring has not exploded in triumphant steam, cured your back pain, or canceled your responsibilities. But there is a small, quiet relief in knowing that some of your worries now live at the bottom of a pool, under cool, moving water, instead of rattling endlessly around your skull. You sit back on your heels and listen. The spring murmurs on, small and persistent, a kind of liquid breathing beneath the hill. Above, the fort holds its long, dry silence. Between them, you occupy the narrow strip of time called right now, letting the sound of water wash gently around your thoughts until even the idea of wishing begins to feel less desperate and more like a very human way of admitting you can't carry everything alone. Eventually, the stillness around the spring begins to feel full rather than empty, and your legs remind you that kneeling on damp ground is not a long-term lifestyle choice. You press your palms on your thighs, straighten slowly, and give the cluster of offerings one last look. The hill fort waits somewhere above, the day stretches somewhere ahead, and you, armed with nothing but a slightly damp backside and a marginally lighter heart, step back onto the path. The track from the spring twists through the trees before spilling you out onto open slope again. The fort perches behind you, its banks softened by distance, watching with the mild disinterest of something that has survived far worse decisions than whatever you were about to do. Ahead, the land rolls away and long-backed hills, stitched together by hedgerows and faint paths. Somewhere beyond them runs an old ridgeway, one of those routes that has carried feet and hooves for longer than your brain can comfortably hold. It seems as good a direction as any. As you climb toward the higher ground, the sky begins to renegotiate its terms. That gentle pale blue you admired earlier fades behind a slow-moving curtain of gray. Clouds gather in overlapping sheets, the kind that do not shout but don't exactly look friendly either. The light drains sideways out of the fields, leaving colors flatter, shadows softer. A wind you barely noticed before starts to push at your jacket, testing seams, sliding fingers of cold down the back of your neck. You remind yourself that you are, in fact, not an Iron Age traveler with limited options and a questionable cloak. You have a phone, a map app, and a weather forecast that promised light showers with that uniquely British optimism that treats sideways rain as a personality-building exercise. Even so, the shift in the air trips something old in your body. Muscles tighten a little, senses sharpen. It is amazing how fast your nervous system can upgrade nice walk to mild unnecessary expedition when the sky changes its mood. The path you've chosen is more suggestion than road. A double line of compressed grass curves along the slope, dissolving now and then into sheep tracks and then reassembling itself as if nothing happened. You follow it with the kind of confidence that is really just momentum in disguise. The hedges offer no commentary, only hawthorn and bramble, and the occasional bird flicking out and back like punctuation marks. The fort behind you gradually sinks below the horizon, its comforting geometry replaced by a more ambiguous swell of land. At a shallow saddle between two hills, the track splits. One line climbs toward a rounded top speckled with gorse, another skirts its flank, skimming the contour like a cautious thought avoiding a hard question. The map on your screen, when you coax it awake, shows a tangle of dashed lines that may or may not correspond to what your eyes see. Your location dot wobbles, unsure which path you've already taken, much like you when someone asks, "So, where do you see yourself in 5 years?" You pick a direction, the contouring path because it looks kinder on your knees, and commit. For a while it behaves, hugging the side of the hill, giving you wide views across a quilt of fields. You fall into a shallow trance of forward movement, step, breath, wind, repeat. Then the path simply thins, almost apologetically, and dissolves into a scatter of hoofprints leading in 3 different directions, none of which match the confident line on your map. This is the moment your brain has been quietly waiting for. The internal monologue, which had been dozing peacefully under a blanket of mist and moss, sits bolt upright. You glance around. The fort is no longer visible. The spring is hidden somewhere behind folds of land. The hedgerows here are lower, the landmarks more generic. Hills repeat in variations of the same theme: soft, green, moderately smug. Everything looks a little bit like everything else. To be clear, you are not actually in danger. You are within walking distance of at least 3 villages, a main road, and several people with dogs who would probably point you toward civilization in exchange for a mildly awkward conversation. You're also carrying a device that can, in theory, show you exactly where you are on the planet. But your body doesn't care about theory. It just knows that the visible, obvious path has vanished, the sky is getting darker, and the last time it felt like this, you were probably lost in a supermarket as a child. Your heart rate ticks up. Thoughts start to cluster. What if I'm going in circles? What if it pours? What if my battery dies? What if I end up in an article about poorly prepared walkers who should have known better? You take a breath and hear the faint edge of panic in it, thin and sharp like a crack in glass. It's almost impressive how quickly your mind can turn open countryside into a stage for catastrophe, when 5 minutes ago it was bored enough to worry about email phrasing. You stop, because spiraling physically and mentally at the same time rarely leads anywhere helpful. The wind tugs your hood sideways. A few exploratory drops of rain tap your cheeks, cool and precise. For a moment you stand exactly where you are, not moving forward, not retreating, just existing in the mild discomfort of uncertainty. Your life has felt like this more often than you care to admit, a network of half-visible options, none clearly marked. Your internal map, a blur of dashed lines that make sense only in hindsight. Somewhere in the back of your mind, the hill fort clears its throat. You remember the people who built its banks without GPS, whose daily journeys were guided by repeated experience, by where the sun rose and set, by the feel of the ground underfoot. They walked these landscapes in all weathers because not walking them was not an option. Getting a bit wet was not a dramatic plot twist, it was just Tuesday. Compared to their risk calculations, your situation is a mildly inconvenient detour in good boots. Still, the unease is real. You make yourself look, really look, instead of scanning for instant answers. The land offers subtle clues if you slow down long enough to read them. A faint linear dip runs along the hillside a little above you, as if someone once dragged a finger through the landscape and time half-filled the groove. Beyond it, a line of older trees, ash, oak, beech, marches along the crest, their roots anchored in something more stable than field boundaries and forgetful map updates. The phone in your hand is useful, but it is not the only map available. You tuck it back into your pocket, feeling the solid rectangle against your leg, reassuring but no longer your only lifeline. Above you, the gray sky hangs low, but not yet bursting. Below, the fields wait with impersonal patience. Somewhere between them, a path older than both your anxiety and your operating system threads its way along the ridge. You inhale, taste rain and leaf mold and the metallic tang of your own adrenaline, and take the first careful step toward that faint depression running across the slope, trusting that old trackways rarely go nowhere. The first few steps toward the old depression in the hillside feel tentative, like walking onto a stage you did not rehearse for. The ground is uneven, tufts of grass grabbing at your boots, small stones shifting with treacherous enthusiasm. Your brain, still humming with what-ifs, keeps trying to turn every minor wobble into a prequel to disaster. Yet with each step, your body begins to remember that it knows how to do this. Forward, adjust, breathe, repeat. panic, would rather sprint. You insist on walking. As you reach the faint hollow, it becomes clearer that this is not just a random dip. The land has been pressed here many times before. The slope inside the groove is smoother than the grass around it, the soil thinner, the turf worn just enough to hint at history. It feels like the ghost of a lane, once cut by hooves and bare feet, then used by carts and boots, then gradually abandoned when newer, straighter routes were laid down below. Your soles sit a little more securely in this shallow trench, as if the hill itself is cupping them, saying, "Just go this way for now." Wind still leans into you, but it no longer feels like an accusation. It is simply there, pushing across the open flank of the hill, tugging at your hood, making you aware of the space around your skin. The incoming rain, which your anxious mind had already upgraded to a dramatic storm sequence, proves itself to be the gentler kind, small cool drops that freckle your jacket and bead on your eyelashes. They sharpen the smells of leaf mold, grass, and distant wood smoke, grounding your senses in things that actually exist instead of fears that only might. You follow the hollow as it meanders along the contour. It is not a straight line. Nothing here is. Every so often, it splits around a tree or a gorse clump, rejoining on the far side in a quiet compromise between persistence and obstacle. Above you, that older line of trees holds its course. Oaks with wide, stubborn trunks, beeches with smooth gray bark and roots like gripping hands, ash with their black buds waiting for a season you have not reached yet. Their presence feels deliberate, as if someone once planted them as markers, or as if the track simply grew along where they already stood. You start to notice how the land itself keeps hinting at direction. A gap in a hedge lines up neatly with a gate further on, which in turn points toward a faint notch in the skyline. A flattened strip of grass between two thickets forms a narrow natural corridor, persuading feet and hooves to pass through the same place again and again. The ridge you're following lifts gently in front of you and falls away on both sides, giving the sense of a spine under the landscape, a high, dry line that would be obvious even in deep mud or winter snow. Your breathing eases, sliding from quick, shallow gulps back into a slower rhythm that your diaphragm can actually keep up with. The absurd, catastrophizing monologue in your head loses some of its authority. It's hard to catastrophize convincingly when you can see 3 different villages tucked into the folds of the land, each with its own cluster of rooftops and the promise of tea, snacks, and possibly a judgmental cat. You are not in the wilds. You are in a landscape that has been lived in, walked through, and rearranged for millennia. The chances of accidentally vanishing into myth are disappointingly low. You let that fact be comforting rather than anticlimactic. There's something soothing in knowing that other people have navigated here before you, people who did it without satellites and signal bars, guided instead by habit, sun, stars, and the simple need to get from one hearth to another. You imagine traders moving along this ridge with packs of salt or metal, gossip and news trailing behind them like invisible cloaks. You picture drovers guiding livestock, their bodies leaning instinctively into the wind just as yours is doing now. Your small moment of, oh no, no obvious path, shrinks next to their long, repetitive journeys. As the track curls around a shoulder of the hill, the land opens out in front of you with a little flourish, as if pleased by your persistence. The ridgeway ahead becomes clearer, a gently rising line scored into the grass, wide enough for several people to walk abreast. Beyond it, the horizon steps down in terraces of distant hills, then fields, then a smudge of a larger town. Closer at hand, almost directly below, sits a village, a cluster of roofs, a church tower, a scatter of houses with gardens tangled around them. Smoke rises from one chimney, pale and lazy. You pause, letting the view soak through your eyes and into that part of your nervous system that only believes in things it can see. This, it concedes, is not lost. This is between places, which is a very different state. The panic that had been fizzing at the back of your thoughts mutters a few last objections: battery life, weather, the great unknown number of remaining emails, and then, finding no traction, sulks itself into silence. In its place comes a quieter awareness. You never had a complete map, and you never will, but you do have enough for the next stretch: a ridge, a line of trees, a village to aim at, and your own capacity to move one step at a time. You start walking again, following the ridgeway toward that small knot of houses, letting the land's old logic guide you. The fort is somewhere behind, the spring somewhere below, your coin resting at the bottom of its pool. Ahead lies whatever arrives next. Between them, you travel along this high, patient track, learning slowly, awkwardly, but genuinely that sometimes the surest way forward is not the one glowing on a screen, but the one carved so gently into the world that you only notice it when you finally, mercifully, slow down. The ridgeway carries you forward with the quiet confidence of something that has been useful for so long it no longer needs to prove itself. Fine rain has faded into mist. Distant fields blur as if someone has gently rubbed the landscape with a thumb. Your steps feel steadier now. You are not conquering anything, just following a line that has already done the hard work of existing. Ahead, the village slowly lifts out of the haze. A scatter of roofs, a flash of road, a square church tower that still counts as modern compared with the watching hill fort behind you. The ridge tilts downward and the world narrows. Turf gives way to packed earth, then gravel, then the first shy strip of tarmac. Hedges gather on either side, studded with hawthorn and the occasional defiant crisp packet. This is the gradient of re-entry, from ramparts and ritual springs back to wheelie bins, parked cars, and that one garden gnome that has definitely seen too much. Your body adjusts without being asked. Your stride shortens. Your shoulders fold in a little, as if the lane is quietly reminding you that other people also exist. At the village edge, a wooden sign waits, its letters slightly faded, its post ringed with wildflowers that grew there without filling in any forms. Beneath the name, smaller paint notes a twinning with some distant town you have never visited. Communities like to tether themselves to other places, a modest way of saying, we may be small, but we are not alone. In one corner of the sign, someone has painted a simple emblem, a hill, a ring, a spiral at the center. Old Fort, new logo, heritage with a graphic designer. Beyond it, houses gather, stone walls, slate roofs, neat windows that manage to look both modern and tired. Dates are carved above a few doorways, digits from centuries when candles were default and screen time meant staring into a fire. You wander toward the middle almost by instinct, drawn to the slightly bumpy patch of grass that insists on being the village green. Football has scarred one end. Dogs have audited every corner, yet something older presses through. In the center, a low ring of stones forms a shallow platform. Around it stand several wooden posts, each topped with a simple carved sign: leaf, sun, crescent, grain, a looping knot. In the middle, a metal socket waits for a pole that is absent today. It could all be passed off as quirky landscaping if it did not feel so much like a small, patient stage resting between performances. Your mind does the easy work of filling it in. In spring, a maypole rises from that socket, ribbons streaming, children and adults orbiting in chaotic loops that only sometimes resemble a pattern. In late autumn, the same circle hosts a bonfire, flames licking at the dark while faces glow and smoke threads itself into everyone's hair. In the thin weeks of winter, lanterns hang from the carved posts, casting small halos onto frozen grass, while someone remarks, half joking and half sincere, that there has always been something on this spot when the year turns. The names of the festivals change, the need to mark the hinge points of the seasons does not. Further along, a small shop announces itself with a hand-lettered board. Most of the list is practical: bread, milk, batteries, but in one corner you notice a different line: Midsummer Hill Walk and Sunrise Breakfast. All welcome, bring something to share. Instantly you see a crowd of villagers trudging up the ramparts at an hour that should probably be illegal, carrying flasks and foil-wrapped offerings. They stand where you stood, watching the sun haul itself over the fields. No one is reciting precise Iron Age rituals. They are simply choosing, together, to treat one morning as more than another blur. As you drift past front gardens and quiet driveways, you realize that the line between Celtic tradition and local event is thinner than it looks in history books. Most of the people who bake cakes for solstice fundraisers or hang fairy lights by the old stones outside the village are not thinking in academic terms. They are giving shape to time, knotting their days onto a string of shared occasions so life does not dissolve into one long, indistinguishable scroll. The hill fort, the spring, the ridgeway, and now this village feel less like separate stops and more like organs in the same calm body. You move through its circulatory system, one small, red-cheeked cell among many, carried along by habits older than your personal worries. Something in your chest, clenched for so long it thought that was its only job, softens. You do not belong here in any official sense, yet the pattern of this place makes a little room for you anyway, and for a brief, wobbly moment, you allow yourself to believe that you too are allowed to move with the seasons instead of against them. The village does what villages do best. It offers you a gentle exit route. A narrow lane slips away from the green between two houses, gravel crest flat by years of feet, hooves, bike tires, and the occasional overly confident delivery van. A small wooden finger post at its mouth points outward, its arrow painted with two simple words: standing stones. It is both an invitation and a spoiler, like a trailer that tells you the entire plot, yet somehow still makes you watch the film. You let the arrow decide for you and drift in that direction. The lane passes behind gardens where laundry flaps lazily, turning the morning's myths back into fabric that still needs folding. A cat watches you from a wall with that particular expression cats have when they are judging your entire life based on the way you walk. You continue anyway, because if you waited until cats approved of you before doing anything, you would never leave your bed. The lane tilts upward again, hedges curling overhead until they almost meet, turning the world into a green tunnel that smells of damp earth, crushed leaves, and the faint sugar of something blooming somewhere unseen. When the lane opens, it does so suddenly, like stepping through a curtain. You find yourself at the edge of a field that has clearly decided it will be grass forever, no matter how many other crops trend on social media. Beyond it, on a low rise, stands the circle. At first, the stones look like a handful of teeth pushing up through the turf, irregular, gray, their tops softened by lichen and weather. As you walk closer, they separate into individual presences, some taller than you, some barely up to your waist, yet arranged in a pattern that pulls your eyes into a loop before your brain has time to map it. There is nothing flashy here. No towering monument, no dramatic cliff, no gift shop trying to sell you authentic Celtic incense. The stones simply stand where someone decided they should stand, a ring of verticals rising from a world of horizontals. Grass thickens around their bases, tufted and a little wild where the mower has clearly been asked to respect boundaries. In the center, the ground is a fraction more bare, as if feet still find reasons to pause there. The sky above hangs low and even, a gray dome mirroring the green circle below. You feel the geometry slot into place in your senses, quiet and sure. You approach the nearest stone and stop just within arm's reach. Its surface is rough in some places, surprisingly smooth in others, where hands have trailed over it for centuries of curiosity, prayer, or boredom. Lichen blooms in slow-motion constellations, white, gray, mustard yellow. Under your fingertips, the rock feels neither warm nor cold, just solid in a way your thoughts rarely manage. This thing has been standing here longer than your entire family tree, longer than the church tower, possibly as long as people have been telling each other stories about what the hill fort is really for. You step back, then move inward, letting your feet follow the line of the circle without overthinking it. Each stone you pass presents itself with small variations, this one leaning slightly outward, as if half bowing to the surrounding fields. That one split down the center, a crack widened by frost and time, until the stone seems to be slowly, politely separating into two opinions. Some stones carry shallow grooves that might be the ghosts of carvings, or they might be the work of water and patient weather. Your brain, ever helpful, tries to assign meaning to each mark. The circle itself does not seem in any rush to confirm or deny. In the middle, you let yourself stop. The grass here has been recently flattened by picnics, yoga mats, children running in overlapping orbits, people who needed somewhere to sit that was not a desk, a sofa, or a hospital chair. You turn slowly on your heel, counting the stones without really needing the number. What matters is not how many there are, but that they close the shape, forming a boundary that is symbolic rather than defensive. The Hillford's ramparts said, "Keep danger out." The stone circle seems to say, "Here is a place to notice you are alive." Your breathing, which had matched the brisk pace of the lane and your lingering, "what if I get rained on" reflex, begins to slow. The simple repetition of verticals around you gives your attention something to orbit. It is hard for thoughts to splinter into 100 anxious directions when every line in your field of vision keeps looping back into the same quiet circle. You feel your internal chaos do something very strange. It starts to organize itself, not into a to-do list or a productivity hack, but into a pattern of movement that only has one rule: keep going gently around. You think of all the uses this space might have had: ceremonies marking the sun's position, gatherings that turned seasons into shared experiences instead of private calendar notifications, moments when people looked up from their individual struggles and remembered they were part of a wider pattern, whether they liked it or not. You picture also the quieter uses: one person standing here at dawn because they couldn't sleep, another at dusk because they didn't want to go home yet, a child spinning in the center until the world blurred, just to feel what their body could do. For a brief, honest moment, you acknowledge that in the grand scheme of history, your worries are very small. Then, because you are human and not a rock, you immediately feel both guilty and weirdly protective of them. Small does not mean insignificant. A pebble inside a shoe can still reshape an entire day. Standing in the stone circle does not erase your problems, it just holds them in a geometry that makes them easier to look at from more than one angle. You let your gaze drift outward, beyond the ring. The hill fort sits somewhere beyond the horizon, its massive earthworks tracing a far larger circle than this one, its ditches and banks still carrying the imprint of fear and determination. The spring lies between them and here, a small, liquid center where wishes have accumulated like coins at the bottom of the pool. The ridgeway threads through it all, a long, flexible line that refuses to be straight. And now this circle adds its quiet voice. Stand, breathe, turn slowly. Remember that not everything needs to be solved at speed. You close your eyes for a moment, not to shut the place out, but to feel it without the distraction of surfaces. Wind brushes your skin, cool and insistent. Moisture clings to your lashes. The faint, distant noise of village life reaches you in softened fragments. A car door, a dog barking, someone rearranging recycling boxes. Under all of it lies a deeper hush, the kind that accumulates when people have been coming to the same spot for longer than anyone remembers, leaving behind little fragments of attention like candles burned down to stubs. When you open your eyes again, nothing dramatic has changed. The stones continue to be stones. The sky continues to be gray. Yet inside you, a few frantic edges have rounded off. Your scattered attention, which usually ricochets between worries like a fly in a jar, has settled into a slower orbit. You are still you, tired, flawed, mildly confused by life. But for this moment, you are also part of a circle that doesn't demand anything except that you stand within it and exist. It is not a cure, but it is a start. Leaving the stone circle is harder than entering it. There is something addictive about standing in a place that asks absolutely nothing from you, except that you exist in it for a while. But eventually, your feet begin to shuffle. Your back informs you that you are not, in fact, a timeless monument, and the soft itch of hunger reminds you that your body has certain non-negotiable requirements, like food and sitting down. You give the stones a last slow turn of your head, letting each one take a final copy of your attention, and then you step gently over the invisible threshold of the ring. The path back to the village feels different on the return, though nothing fundamental has changed. The hedge still leans in with unwashed enthusiasm. The lane still curves with familiar shyness. The same cat probably still believes you are doing life incorrectly. Yet you are now a person who has stood in a stone circle, which is not exactly a superpower, but is also not nothing. Your steps land a little more softly, as if some skittish corner of your mind has been coaxed into loosening its grip on, well, everything. You pass the village green again, its carved posts watching with the patient interest of wooden things that have seen far more dramatic exits than yours. A faint tang of cooking drifts from one open window. Onion, maybe garlic, the universal smell of someone is going to be okay in about half an hour. The shop you noticed earlier has propped its door half open with a crate of empty bottles, a mundane little barricade against the wind. You could wander in, buy something, rejoin the bright fluorescent world, but the hill country still tugs at you from beyond the rooftops. So you let your route bend not toward the center, but away again, following a lane that sidesteps the village and noses up between fields. It is narrower here, less paved, more honest about being a compromise between human intention and geography. The tarmac gives up for a while, thinning into compacted dirt and stones that fit under your boots like small, stubborn thoughts. The climb is gentle. You hardly notice it until you glance back and see the roofs dipping lower, the church tower slipping down like a bookmark between pages. Clouds, having spent the last hour sulking in a uniform gray sheet, begin to shred themselves into distinct shapes. Light leaks through in cautious beams, catching patches of hillside in sudden temporary glory while leaving others in soft shadow. You feel the shift in your body before you fully see it, a slight easing of the shoulders, a tiny, almost embarrassing lift in mood. No matter how sophisticated your brain likes to think it is, a shaft of sunlight will still bribe it into behaving like a hopeful animal. As you crest a modest rise, the larger shape of the hill country reveals itself in stages. To your left, the long back of the ridgeway you followed earlier stretches away, its faint groove now a subtle line of shadow and texture rather than a problem to be solved. Beyond it, layers of distant hills fade into paler and paler blue, stacked like memories you can almost, but not quite, retrieve. To your right, fields tumble down toward the river, each one patterned with the particular neuroses of its owner. Neat rows, messy patches, adventurous attempts at variety. Somewhere ahead, lies the direction of the fort. You cannot yet see its ramparts, but the overall feel of the land hints at their presence. A certain swelling of the horizon, a broad-shouldered curve that belongs more to story than to agriculture. You aim yourself roughly that way, trusting that if you keep to the higher ground, the hill will eventually rise up and make itself obvious. This is the long, soft descent from the heights, not a straight drop back into your usual life, but a gentle, meandering drift in its general direction, with plenty of time to misinterpret things and then feel better about them. Your body is pleasantly tired now. Not that twitchy exhaustion of too much screen time, where every joint feels like it has been incorrectly installed, but the simpler fatigue of muscles that have actually been used for something other than maintaining seated posture. Your calves have started a low-level complaint, the kind that will upgrade itself into theatrical drama tomorrow morning when you try to get out of bed. Your feet carry a thin film of mud and grass, a small portable archive of everywhere you have stepped today. In your pockets and on your clothes, you carry other, less visible souvenirs. A faint scent of smoke from some distant chimney has woven itself into your jacket. A smear of moss stain lingers on one sleeve where you brushed the ramparts without thinking. Somewhere in the lining of your mind, the cool pressure of stone under your fingertips at the circle still hums, slow and solid. And then there is the coin you no longer have, living now at the bottom of the spring, anchoring a worry you decided very quietly to stop carrying alone. Thoughts rise and fall as you walk, but they no longer crash into each other. Instead, they appear, do a small lap around your attention like elderly swimmers in a warm pool, and then drift away without demanding a rescue mission. You remember in flashes the winter feast you imagined within the fort walls, the way the ramparts held back storm and dark so that the people inside could focus on staying warm and fed. You think of your own walls, habits, boundaries, half-finished resolutions, and wonder which of them actually protect anything and which are just elaborate anxiety cosplay. The path begins to slope downward in earnest now, the hills unwinding themselves beneath your boots. Ahead, a stile leans against a hedge like someone who meant to stand up straight and then got distracted. Beyond it, a broader track descends in a long, lazy S-curve toward lower fields. You cross over and let a bit of gravity do the more work. The rhythm of your steps becomes less effortful, more like a lullaby your body hums to itself. Down, down, breathe, repeat. Every so often you glance back. The stone circle is out of sight, tucked behind its fold of land, but you know exactly where it sits in relation to the village and the ridge. The spring lies beyond, hidden in its pocket of trees, guarding your small metal offering with the same nonchalance it has shown to everything else people have thrown into it over the centuries. And somewhere, still ahead but closer now, the fort waits, with its layered banks, its misty hollows, its long habit of watching people come, worry, walk, and leave. By the time you reach the lower ground, the light has changed again. The sky has opened just enough for a warm, late glow to spread along the western edge, turning the damp grass into a muted mirror for whatever color the evening is trying on. You are not yet home, not even necessarily sure where home is in relation to this exact point, but you are moving in that direction with a little more trust than you had when you first set out. The heights have given you their views. Now the descent offers something quieter. The sense that the stories you have gathered of forts and springs and stones and small villages making seasonal mischief are tucked into you like invisible charms in your pockets, ready to rattle gently whenever the road ahead feels steeper than you expected. Even as you drift along the lower paths, some part of you keeps glancing upward, the way you might look back at a friend who stayed behind on a balcony. The day has turned that quiet corner between afternoon and evening, when everything holds its breath, waiting to see what color the sky plans to wear. Hedges deepen into shadow. The air cools on your cheeks. You are closer to roads now, to houses, to the practical geometry of ordinary life. Yet the hill, with its fort, still tugs you like a loose thread at the edge of your awareness. A side lane appears, almost shyly, slipping between two fields of rough grazing. It is less a road than a suggestion, two faint wheel ruts, with grass stubbornly occupying the middle. You recognize the angle of the slope, the way the land ahead rounds upward in that broad, familiar way. Without needing to consult your phone or your anxiety, you know this will lead you back toward the fort. You don't need to go there again. You could easily continue on, find a bus, let the evening fold around you somewhere indoors. But the thought of seeing the hill once more under a different sky unties something inside your chest. You turn. The climb is slower this time, not just because your legs have already collected a good day's worth of hills, but because the light insists on doing complicated, beautiful things around you. The west glows with a muted gold that never quite becomes dramatic, just enough to turn damp grass into a soft shimmer. Trees stand in silhouette, their branches threading the sky like black lace. Every so often, a bird cuts across your path in a swift, purposeful line, heading towards some roosted trusts, more than your sense of direction. As you rise, the sounds of lower ground unravel behind you, the distant hiss of a car on wet tarmac, the faint, bright shriek of children who have not yet been dragged indoors for dinner, the bark of a dog performing one final, heroic patrol of its garden. In their place grows a quieter register, the sigh of wind across open slopes, the occasional chuckle of a crow who clearly thinks it knows better than everyone. By the time you reach the familiar outer banks, the world below has dimmed to a loose scatter of lights, villages and farms pricking the landscape with small, deliberate stars. The fort emerges, not with fanfare, but with the calm assurance of something that has never needed it. Ramparts that were soft and green at dawn now stand darker, their curves sharper against the fading sky. The ditches are shadows within shadows, hollows where night gathers first. Mist has not returned, but a thin coolness hangs in the air, the kind that carries the promise of dew on every surface by morning. You step through the same worn entrance as before, and for a moment it feels like stepping back into the first part of a story you only half remember. Inside, the hilltop is mostly empty. The early risers have long since gone to offices, kitchens, errands, and the quiet aftermath of their own days. A single figure crosses the far side of the fort, zipped coat zipped up to the chin, a dog orbiting their legs like a small satellite completing its final laps before night. Their movements are brisk, but not hurried, as if they too are here for a last look at something that makes sense in ways spreadsheets do not. After a short time, they drift away through the entrance, leaving the space to you and whatever the evening plans to do with you. The sky deepens. Blue slides toward indigo, then begins to flirt with black. The first real stars appear, one by one, faint at first, then gaining confidence as the light drains from the edges of the world. You stand on the inner bank and look down into the fort's shallow bowl, imagining again the round houses clustered where now only grass lies. This time, the firelight is replaced by a different kind of glow, an invisible field of memory. Of all the nights people have stood on this hill and stared upward, wondering versions of the same questions you quietly carry. You tilt your head back and let your eyes adjust. More stars reveal themselves, scattered in careless generosity across the dark. Somewhere out there, galaxies spin in silence, vast and indifferent. Somewhere nearer, planes blink along prescribed routes, carrying people who are probably still worrying about in-flight snacks and connection times. The contrast is ridiculous and perfect. You stand in the overlap, a tired human on an old hill, feeling both absurdly small and strangely, stubbornly real. If the hill could talk, and it's probably best that it cannot, because the sarcasm would be lethal, it would have things to say about this. It has watched so many versions of you panicking about different things: harvests, raids, taxes, wars, exam results, performance reviews, unread messages. Every generation has sworn that its particular set of crises is uniquely impossible, and still, people have climbed up here to look at the sky, to breathe, to ask for help, or just to feel something bigger than their own heads. The hill fort's earthworks slope around you like a raised eyebrow. You're not the first, they seem to say, and you won't be the last, but sure, have your existential moment. You let yourself smile, small and tired at the thought. The worry that once spiked when the path disappeared feels like a softer thing now, less like a cliff edge and more like a steep, uneven staircase you know you can climb with enough pauses. You remember the spring, your coin resting under its cool veil of water, the ridgeway quietly insisting that old paths still work, the stone circle teaching your attention how to move in gentle orbits. All of them are parts of the same patient landscape that, in its own wordless way, has been offering you examples of how to exist without knowing everything. Night settles further. The last smear of color on the horizon fades, leaving only the distinction between land and sky, a dark curve holding up a darker dome. The fort, which at dawn felt like a place you were approaching, now feels like a presence that is approaching you. Not threatening, not exactly comforting, just there, solid, enduring, dryly amused by your determination to carry every problem like a hero in a story no one else is reading. In its quiet, hulking way, the hill suggests an alternative. Stay, breathe. Let some of that weight seep down into soil that has been absorbing human worry for centuries without breaking. You stand there a little longer, watching stars sharpen, feeling the chill creep through your jacket in honest, uncomplicated lines. Eventually, the practical parts of you speak up. You will need to leave soon if you don't want to navigate every hedge and stile in full darkness. But when you do go, you will not be leaving the magic behind like a set piece. The fort, the spring, the stones, the village rituals, they are stitched into the land now. And almost without your permission, they are stitched into you as well, tucked between your thoughts like sturdy, quiet threads. You take one last, slow breath, letting the cold air fill you, then turn away from the ramparts. Behind you, the hill fort sinks deeper into shadow, its outline a patient, slightly sarcastic guardian against the starlit sky. Ahead, the faint line of the path back down glows just enough in the fading light for you to trust your feet to find it. You start walking, carrying the dark, observant bulk of the hill at your back and the soft, waiting night in front of you, already half slipping from history into dream. The path down unwinds beneath your feet like a thought you have finally decided not to argue with. You leave the ramparts behind, yet they do not feel left. They sit at your back like a quiet, watchful presence, the way a trusted friend might stay at the doorway a moment longer after you have gone inside. The slope draws you back toward the stitched-together world of hedges, lanes, and half-heard televisions glowing behind curtains. Your steps grow smaller as the ground levels out, then flatter still as the first real road gathers you into its unromantic embrace. Streetlights wink on, one by one, like a polite but insistent reminder that the modern world runs on a different kind of rhythm. Timetables, notifications, supermarket closing hours. A car passes, headlights briefly bleaching the hedges, and you glimpse your own reflection in the side window, just a tired figure in an ordinary jacket, walking along an ordinary verge. Yet somewhere behind your eyes, the silhouette of the hill fort still rises, an invisible crown on your slightly hunched posture. The village lights appear sooner than they feel like they should, small constellations of warm yellow in the bluish dusk. You recognize a few shapes now: the skewed roof of the shop, the carved posts on the green, the line of houses that curves like a sleepy spine along the lane. Someone is bringing in washing with the weary efficiency of a person who has done this more times than they can count. A dog makes one final half-hearted fuss at the evening, then resigns itself to going indoors. It is all so normal that your day among forts and springs and stones could almost be something you invented to make the walk to the bus stop more interesting. Yet, as you pass the green, your eyes flick automatically to the low ring of stones and the empty socket where the seasonal pole will rise again. The circle you stood in on the hillside echoes here in miniature, a place where people mark the turning of nothing and everything. Beyond the village, in some other shadowed fold of land, the spring you visited keeps overflowing, indifferent to bedtime and work days and whatever meeting you're meant to pretend to be alert for tomorrow. The coin you dropped is still there, resting under the water, busy doing absolutely nothing. And somehow that non-activity feels reassuring. By the time you reach the edge of settlement, the sky has tipped fully into night, but your body continues to move on stored instructions. Left here, straight there, cross at the familiar corner, follow the pavement that knows you as well as any old trackway. The landscape around you has lost its hedges and fields, traded them for buildings and lampposts. Yet inside your chest, the ridgeway still runs along a high, quiet line. The stones still stand in their ring, the ramparts still curve around an empty bowl full of imagined firelight and real stars. Eventually you reach your own door, whatever shape, color, or code that word holds for you. The key turns, the latch clicks, and you step into the familiar arrangement of objects that say, "You live here." Shoes exiled near the threshold, a half-read book, a mug with ambitious tea stains, the unfathomable tangle of the charging cables you definitely meant to organize last month. The air is different indoors, denser with the habits of your everyday life. Outside, the hill country continues under the sky. Inside, you move through the smaller geography of your home, each piece of furniture a landmark your muscles know even in the dark. You peel off your jacket, feeling the small signatures of the day fade with it, the smell of damp grass, the ghost of chimney smoke, and the fine grit of dried mud. Your body is gently sore in that pleasantly accusatory way that promises you will notice stairs tomorrow. You plug in your phone, that anxious little oracle of weather and maps and messages, and watch its screen flare with familiar icons, tiny modern standing stones arranged in a glowing grid. For once, you do not rush to open every notification. The hill has reminded you that not every arrival demands immediate ceremony. The rituals of unwinding unfold almost without conscious thought. Perhaps you shower, washing off the salt of dried sweat and the fine dust of the day's roads. Perhaps you just change into softer clothes, letting your skin breathe in cotton instead of zips and seams. You drink water that comes from a tap instead of a sacred spring, yet some small part of you cannot help but compare the cool slide of it down your throat with the steady flow you watched in the stone-lined pool. Different sources, same simple gift. You are still here, still being kept alive by ordinary miracles. At last you reach the part of the map that has no further detours. Your bed, nest, sofa corner, whatever it is that you surrender the day. The fabric creases around your weight with the tenderness of something that has learned your exact shape. You lie down and feel your spine lengthen, the invisible armor of the day loosening plate by plate. Somewhere in your muscles, ramparts soften. Somewhere in your thoughts, stone circles rearrange into rings of pillows and folded blankets. The ground beneath you is no longer a hilltop, but your nervous system, which is frankly terrible at distinguishing between real and imagined, still hums with the memory of that wide, stable earth. You close your eyes. Behind the lids, darkness blooms not as an empty void, but as a space waiting for pictures. The first image that rises is the fort at dawn, mist wrapped around its banks like breath around a secret. Then the spring appears, its surface trembling under a small coin that is, for tonight, carrying more than its weight in metal. The ridgeway grows out of the dark, a thin, certain line along high ground, and the stone circle comes last, its quiet geometry embracing everything else. These places you walked through are no longer only outside you. They have arranged themselves like constellations in the soft sky behind your eyes. As you slide deeper toward sleep, the centuries that separate you from the first hill fort builders loosen their grip. You are just another tired human wandering between ditches and banks, between one season of your life and the next, between worry and trust. The forts keep their silent watch over the landscape. In your mind, they keep watch over you too, their long, dry patience a shield against the restless storms of thought that usually patrol the edges of your night. You breathe in, breathe out, and let their weight guard your dreams as you drift, slowly and steadily out of waking and into the soft, half-remembered centuries of your own sleeping world. The day slides away behind you like a path down a hill, and you wander again, in dreams this time, through Celtic hill forts at dawn. You are lying wherever you are lying now, wrapped in whatever blanket the day has left you, and all that remains to do is very little. The hill is far away and very close at the same time, existing both as a real shape of earth and as a quiet imprint on your nervous system. You do not need to climb it again tonight. You have already carried it back with you, folded into the soft spaces behind your eyes, waiting there like an old friend who does not mind if you forget their face by morning. Let your attention slow down, like your footsteps did on the ridgeway when you finally stopped arguing with the land. Thoughts may still wander through, muttering about tomorrow's tasks, about messages and mistakes, and small, sharp worries that try to sound bigger than they are. You don't need to fight them or fix them. Just let them move past you the way the wind slid over the ramparts. Present, sometimes a little cold, but never the whole story. Beneath them lies something deeper and steadier. The same quiet that lived in the spring, in the stone circle, in the dark bowl of the fort at night. Feel your body heavier now, as if you are slowly sinking back into soft grass on the hilltop, the earth rising gently to hold your weight. Your arms and legs lengthen and relax, losing their edges. Your chest rises and falls in a calm, unhurried tide, breath washing in and out like mist over the banks at dawn. The muscles along your spine unwind, one by one, like old knots finding out they are allowed to loosen at last. Your face softens, jaw unclenches, eyes rest behind closed lids, no longer scanning for anything. There is nothing you need to watch for here. Above you, in the sky of your imagination, stars appear the way they did when you stood under them on the hill, quietly, without fuss. They do not demand interpretation. They simply exist, distant and constant, while you grow smaller in the most comforting way, shrinking down to the size of one warm, breathing body in a safe, enclosed space. The forts, the springs, the stones, the villages, they are all still out there, busy doing nothing dramatic, just being themselves while you do the same. If stray thoughts return, let them drift across your awareness like small clouds across a wide twilight sky. You don't have to chase them or name them. They can pass without unpacking their luggage. Keep your attention instead on the gentle weight of your body, on the slow rhythm of your breathing, on the way each exhale hands a little more of the day back to the dark. You have walked far enough for now, through landscapes, through years of worry, through rooms inside your own head. It is all right to stop. It is all right to rest. And as you rest, know that nothing urgent is required of you. The hill forts have been standing for centuries without your help. They will keep standing while you sleep. The world can manage without your vigilance for a few hours. Let the ancient banks and quiet stones take the night shift. Let the soft, patient earth hold what you can't hold anymore. Breathe in once more, breathe out, and slip gently over the edge into whatever dreams are waiting, knowing that you are watched over by places that have seen many dawns and will see many more. End of story. Sweet dreams.